You know, I wish the Goldbugs would take a chapter out of the crypto babies. There's so much to learn. They read from the same Old Testament. Bad governments will destroy the value of the currency. Bad governments will try to take away your private property rights. And then what happens with that, the tragedy is human rights are gone.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Silver Bullion Television, SBTV. I'm your host, Patrick Vierra, part of the outreach team of Silver Bullion here in Singapore, where we want to help you truly secure your wealth. Frank Holmes joins us today. Per his Twitter handle, or X handle, at Bulldog Holmes, Frank is the CEO and CIO at US Funds and chairman of HIVE Digital. A dad, a Texan, a philanthropist, an innovator, an author, and a speaker. Frank brings it all to the table here today. We're delighted to have Frank Holmes join us once again today. It's time to saddle up and silver up for Frank Holmes. Frank, welcome back to SBTV. How are you doing?
Outstanding, my friend, is a long time no see.
So I want to start off with the volatility in the markets, gold, silver, and of course, Bitcoin. We'll start with gold and silver first. Why now and why the volatility now?
Well, we can start off with a macro story, and I think it's important to recognize the macro forces. One is just sheer population of the world. There's about 8 billion people. 5 billion people will be electing new leaders this year. New leaders are going to promise the world to you and print a lot of money to get reelected. So you are in an unprecedented 70% of the world's population will be voting this year. So that means currency debasement. That means a concern over private property rights and portable rights. So all of a sudden, the offtake of gold, even at Costco, is running at $200 million a month. So there is some significant factors on this global population going to the election booth. The other part was a year ago, we saw which is called Purchasing Manufacturers Index. To me, it's my favorite leading indicator of commodity demand and job creation for higher paying jobs. So in Germany, it fell almost to COVID levels. It was unbelievable how bad it was. The world actually shrunk, and the magic level of the say water floating about on a ship floating on the top of the ocean is the number 50. And we found the global PMIs went below 50, and they were contracting. Last summer, late in the summer, Germany turns. They bottomed, but no real big expansion, and they've been just slowly climbing. And last month you saw expansion above 50. You saw China come out with the global PMIs, that they're a big key factor in that data point. So we've seen the past few months with PMI slowly rising up to 50. All the commodities, oil prices start rising, copper starts rising, and now they're going through the big expansion. That means rising GDP per capita. What does rising GDP per capita mean? That means that a lot of people in Asia and India and Southeast Asia, over the Middle East, are going to make more money. And when they make more money, there's a sentimental, emotional attachment of gold. They give gold for weddings. They give gold for birthdays. They give gold for any type of a special gift. And the greater the GDP per capita, the more they give. And I remember this 30 years ago in India, when you would look at when they were going to have a rainy season and how bad it was, it would impact gold demand. And if the harvest was really exceptional, then all of a sudden there was more physical demand for gold, for love, for wedding seasons. So I look upon that we have this sort of perfect storm. We have the fear trade of currency devaluations, and we have election polls, and we have global PMI expansion. So this says that we're going to have this double combination, and gold is making all-time highs in many currencies. So to me, this is a much stronger secular bull market rather than US dollars weak, gold is up. No, Gold is making new highs against the yen. Gold is making new highs the past year against the renminbi, against the rupee. So you look at China and India, that's 40% of the world's population, and gold has been making new all-time highs. And now it makes a new all-time high against the US dollar. Very bullish secular bull market for gold.
That's a great point. I've never heard anyone talk about the global election part of it. That's a great point. Also, with gold, there is continued central bank demand. Central banks since 2011 have noticeably been buying the dips and have been buying into higher gold prices. Why the insatiable central bank hunger for gold for over a decade, but particularly in 2022 and 2023?
Well, there's two dynamics there that are driving that. One has been the practice this century of MMT, modern monetary theory. A thought process is that you can stimulate an economy just by printing more money, and then you just tax away the surplus money and you maintain control over inflation. That really hasn't worked as they thought. It's just a slower, it's a faster, synchronized global currency debasements. And so that's a key factor of looking at the MMT impact. The other part, MMT, is that every down cycle, the amount of money they have to print actually increases exponentially. So maybe the first time it was 100 billion, and then it's 500 billion, and now it's a trillion. And the next cycle is going to be 3 trillion. So to get that economy going, and real assets, the alternative asset class world is in fact resetting. So good art, Andy Warhol art. We can go look at gold. We could take a look at silver, but gold more than silver as that alternative asset class that's driven with that. And the creation of Bitcoin that's captured the imagination of younger generation of digital wealth and private property because it does all come back to private property rights. When you hold that gold in your hand or a gold bangle on your wrist, it looks beautiful. It jingles. It's 24 karat. And all of a sudden there's a crisis. Mothers take it off, and that's how they got out of Syria early. The Vietnamese boat people, that's how they got out early. So this idea of gold being love at the same time portable wealth, and this is my private property, is growing in the world. And it's being seen now in the US with Costco selling 1 ounce gold wafers. At first it was $100 million in a month. And now it's Wall Street Journal, I believe, said it's pushing $200 million a month. And a lot of it's professional Asian women from India, from China, that are working in Silicon Valley, in Seattle, etc. Anyone in technology, they understand that they've made money over here and they should just put 5%, 10% in gold. And I think that trend of adoption is going to grow, in particular with Costco.
Wow. Okay, that's another great point. I didn't realize, where I mean, I knew there was buying. They came out and said, I think 200 million a month, but I've always wondered about the demographic of who was actually buying. So you're seeing Asian women as one of the demographics.
And that was reported in a financial report. I believe that Costco made some statement to that effect. I can find it, but I have read it, and I find it just most fascinating that the culture comes back and America's is boom time. And the other part that we understand about fear around the world with central banks is last year was a 25-year all-time high in war breakouts and war skirmishes around the world besides Ukraine, and that triggers more money printing for military. You're seeing a rise, which really surprised me. Turkey is spending way above its normal GDP plus 2%. Why is that? Why is Poland spending so much? Because these countries have been invaded basically with illegal immigration, and they don't know when they're coming in, or they're just women and children. Is it also crazy religious fanatics? They don't know, and you see that along the border of Finland, 10,000 bicycles given, and Putin is basically funding this sort of immigration into destabilize anyone that's NATO. So all those dynamics, they just create, people have this magic button of fear and they go and do different things. In where I am in San Antonio, Texas, what's a boom business is building fences. Why? Because people go and are concerned about all the illegals, and they can be Democrats, and they're going to say, well, I'm still going to vote for Biden, but I don't like what's going on the border. I'm going to build a fence. So you can see that dynamic that takes place. And I went to look at public companies that are in the fence building. There's none. It's either owned by small entrepreneurs or private equity.
If you're enjoying this interview with Frank Holmes and I, please consider subscribing to our YouTube channel. And did you know that at Silver Bullion, there are 6 different types of accounts to fit your needs? To find out more, go to www.silverbullion.com.sg, click on the signups tab, and choose from these 6 different types of accounts. Or email me, Patrick at silverbullion.com.sg, and I'll help to get you started. It's amazing stuff. I never knew about the fences. But silver also, it is in quite the deficit. I read the latest reading where the Silver Institute posted another for 2023 112 million ounce deficit with solar panels, photovoltaics, renewable energy, and so forth. Are we truly looking at a situation where silver is depleting quickly and the market is not fully seeing this yet?
There's a big geopolitical NGO funded from the World Economic Forum and UN, anti-mining, to the degree that I believe Rio Tinto CEO this week said at a conference in Singapore that there's a huge shortage of capital going into mining if you really want to go and change the global use of more energy efficient, sustainable energy that's not carbon dependent. You're going to need more copper, and you're going to need more lithium, and you're going to need much more silver. So if the anti-mining, you see this in Canada, it's just anti-mining policies, and Canadians have been complaining, and Pierre Lassonde and Frank Justra, that the pensions, the Canadian pensions, have more money invested in China than they do in their own country because that's where they get returns on capital. Australia has policies that the government's pension fund has to invest, I think, 30% of their money back into Australian ecosystem, but Canadians not. It's because they're really anti-carbon, they're anti-mining. And so what does that do when the forces are saying we all have to go with a new sustainable business model? You're going to have huge price spikes in copper, silver, and lithium, and other metals that are necessary for the new economy.
I got to ask a few questions about the economy as well. With Fed Chairman Jerome Powell, he's without question starting to back off, lowering rates or at least giving himself some wiggle room. You, eh, your best assessment, Frank. Will we see rate cuts soon or at all?
It's all relative to how big the crisis is. If we get some type of a financial crisis, rates will come down. Otherwise, this global PMI rising, it means rising income. So when I looked at the data points this morning, inflation in the UK is saying 3%, but income paying workers grew 6%. So that will show up in spending. And I believe there's a catch up for it's not that I'm anti, please understand that people aren't getting paid. I think is so critical, but it does create this sort of vicious cycle. And some of the policies in Europe is to shut down farming, and it's just protests everywhere on the carbon footprint, sustainability. I call it a smorgasbord of bad policies. It's created all these protests by the farmers, and you're seeing the same thing now with a carbon tax in Canada. There's always these imbalances between monetary and fiscal policies. And it's not the political party. It's not Democrats versus Republicans. It doesn't matter. It's their policies. And there will always be lags between their policies. It's how big the lag will be that gold really shines.
Yeah, Frank, I know you recently took a trip to France. I hope it was an enjoyable one. I want to ask you because we in the news we see turmoil and all these things happening, in countries like France. How was it there, and are tourists coming back?
I think it's pretty powerful. Which surprised me is one of the ETFs we have is Jets, which is listed on the New York Stock Exchange, and I fly extensively, and every flight's packed, every flight. So the airlines have pricing power, and there's something psychological that's impacted people on the fear of another lockdown, some type of it doesn't matter what if it's manufactured or it's real. That fear has people not afraid of paying $1,000 a night for four-star hotels in Europe. And business class seats are sold out. What do you want to fly to Europe? You get a return flight used to be under 5,000 and it's 15,000 now. Economy is 3,000. Okay, I'm going to book for next year. I can't afford it today. Same price, no discount. So that tells you there's this huge pent up demand, and that's very good for global economic activity. One of my other ETFs, which I call the artery of the world, is called C, and it's on New York Stock Exchange, and it follows the pulse because if you want to go and manufacture copper motors in China or Vietnam, you're going to have to get the metal. The metal is going to come from Indonesia or Australia, and it's going to come up, and you're going to manufacture, and then you're going to put them on another cargo ship to send them over to Europe or to America, or they'll be consumed domestically. That 80% of all shipping of these goods is on boats. And so you can track the global economic activity by following shipping rates. And you don't have to go and be in one country's ETF versus another. All you have to do is follow cargo shipping, and it tells you how flush the arteries are. Well, the arteries are pretty good. There's no heart attacks in the global economy, and when you have the problem in the Houthis in the peninsula of Saudi Arabia, immediately you see the ships just repivoting, going around, rates go up, but it didn't slow down economic activity. Oil prices run up to over $80 a barrel. Doesn't slow down economic activity. So I think that that's a reason why that Powell's not so fast to drop the interest rates. Well, him not doing that has all of a sudden sent a surge in the U.S. dollar against other currencies, and the fact gold hits an all-time high. And I repeat, it's in all currencies. Gold is making an all-time highs. And this is really important to define what's called a secular bull market in gold as an asset class.
Frank, you're a man that wears many hats, and I gotta ask you about the one you're wearing right now, Go AU. Can you tell us a bit about that one?
It's a quant approach to picking gold stocks, something that could beat the GDX and GDXJ on the New York Stock Exchange, and it does it. 30% are royalty companies, and then every quarter I kick out those stocks that all of a sudden impair their free cash flow yield, if they hurt their cash flow return on invested capital. So it's actively done on a quant model, very structured discipline. I did 10,000 hours of regressional work before I launched it, and it's done its job. So that's what we do there. But the other one is, I changed the color. I was telling you earlier about C, and that's following C. And Singapore is the epicenter in the world for shipping finance, and Toronto is the center for mining. International oil and gas is Houston. So we get these centers where there's this clusters of intellectual capital that are doing things and et cetera. So I see I've had to follow from all the shipping lanes and what's going on. Singapore is a very key component to track.
You had mentioned about things not slowing down, and something else that's not slowing down is Bitcoin. I mean, it's more or less been pretty volatile more than it has been stable. But why does Bitcoin prove to be more volatile than precious metals?
I wish the Goldbugs would take a chapter out of the crypto babies. There's so much to learn. First of all, they use memes to be funny, cynical about government policies, etc., but they're witty and funny. A methodology of communicating is like hieroglyphics. Two is that they believe in stacking, and that is when Bitcoin falls, they say buy the dip, hold on for dear life. You don't see that with gold investors. Oh, it's bad. That's why it hasn't gone up. The ecosystem is all about buying the dip, hold on for dear life. This is your private property. This is your means. If something crisis happens, you'll be able to move your wealth. So I think it's really fascinating that ecosystem is growing. And when they have their conferences wherever in the world, they're much bigger than a gold conference. They're much bigger, but they read from the same Old Testament that government policies, monetary and fiscal policy be imbalanced. Bad governments will destroy the value of the currency. Bad governments will try to take away your private property rights. And then what happens with that, the tragedy is human rights are gone. And a lot of the left media just do not get this. And I love the case study I did between Cuba and Singapore. Basically, two leaders take over their city states basically at the same time. Well, who has more freedom, Cubans or Singaporeans? Who has more wealth, Cubans or Singaporeans? Who has a broader, wider education? Singapore, Singapore, Singapore. And so what happens when Venezuela copied Cuba Castro? They took away their property rights. Then they took away their human rights. Now there's a million Venezuelans that are refugees that have come into America. And so the concept of common law in Singapore's quasi common law is that I have my rights, my private property rights. That means I have my human rights. If you take away those private property rights, your human rights are gone. And I think that's with the younger generation, they understand that, they grasp that much more quickly than baby boomers do. And so that when we look at the gold being bought by Costco, it's not baby boomers, it's millennials, and that's just something to share with the demographics. So with that, and I give you the last story. I went to the Spurs game the other day, and last year I had my Go Gold shirt on, and no one says anything to me. This time I put on HODL Gold. Now HODL comes from the word crypto. Hold on for dear life. Don't get frightened by the volatility. And I got these young kids high-fiving me. But I said HODL Gold. They never saw the word gold. They just saw the word HODL.
I like that. What a great story. And I mean it because I was going to ask you here, why do you think there is an undeniable sort of animosity between, let's call them Bitcoin maxis and let's call them gold bugs? I mean, is it the age? Is it not fully understanding why or what each asset does? Is it a grumpy old man who maybe missed the train as Bitcoin left the station, or is it younger people who are energetic and invincible in their youth and maybe haven't experienced fear or failure? So you're close to this space. What do you see between the differences between the two?
I see the gold influencers, a couple of them, were just basically trash talking Bitcoin when Bitcoin was created for the same reasons. And so all you did, and them not wearing it, realizing, is bring an avalanche of crypto people coming back against you. I mentioned this, and I've told some of them, you don't attend Bitcoin conferences, so you're clueless of how big they are. Paris last week was 6,000 people. 6,000. Paid $1,000 a ticket. Singapore had a Bitcoin conference in November last year. Same type of numbers. We're not getting that for gold conferences. We're not getting that for gold mining conferences. We're not getting those numbers. The biggest investment conference, which includes retail or institutional, it's free. And they don't get, like Bitcoin Magazine had 2 years ago 3 years ago in Miami, 30,000 people. And so there's something happening uh, like gaming, the digital world. So I just believe that, and I've advocated that you need both in your portfolio. You don't want to be eating a plate of Bitcoin of 100% because now like eating a plate of jalapenos. It's not good for your stomach. But it can add a lot of flavor to a portfolio and having some. Or you can buy Hive, and that's what I've focused on was the creation of Hive. And remember when I created it in 2017 as a co-founder, you there was no Bitcoin mining public company. It was the first, and we only mine with green energy. And we were mining Ethereum at one time. And when you look at our expertise, we're now building out our AI. Our artificial intelligence data centers are growing by the week. And so we're playing that other big boom. And we have over 2,200 Bitcoin on our balance sheet. We have good cash, and we did last year about 10 million in revenue per employee. That's much higher than the average public company in revenue per employee. So I think that Hive is where I have a lot of my investments, and we own $150 million worth of Bitcoin.
Yeah, because Frank, I think you're an example of where we have a older person, more experienced, wiser person who is into gold, yet you were able to cross that bridge into Bitcoin. And I think that's always a question that's in my mind is really why can't we do it? So I guess you made a good point about some of the guys who are gold guys really just tarnished it up, as they moved into Bitcoin. So, I appreciate how you're saying we need to understand both and have both. So I think that's a good place to start.
I also share the other difference I found is that a lot of real gold bug fanatics, they don't own much gold. It's really just a statement against government policies. They don't like the government, and it has nothing to do with them buying it on sale. It's whereas the Bitcoin ecosystem, it is buy the dip, hold on for dear life, and stock as many bitcoins as you can. I mean, it's a that's a big difference. But both of them are really concerned about governments becoming too centralized and finding a rational reason to confiscate your private property rights.
I think another concern though is that there is that Bitcoin ETF. Can you tell us a bit about them and why do you think they were created?
Well, I think the pressure was so great. It's an election year, and the Bitcoiners, it's interesting how fast they sent millions of dollars to Canadian truckers when they were striking and protesting about their right during COVID. The Prime Minister Trudeau took away their liberties of protesting unless the government approved the protest. So if it wasn't some radical educational thing, then you couldn't protest about any policy with the government. And so that it was to me most fascinating. And the same thing happened this year or last year you saw them funding different politicians. So that has to wake up a lot of politicians here that if they're so anti, that money will go to a politician that's pro private property rights and digital property rights, and that's Bitcoin. And I look at back at history. If you look at the 1215, when the Magna Carta was created, that was a rebellion against the king that was confiscating the barons' property and setting off their workers to go get killed in France. So that was the first real separation of private property and human rights, and it grew. And then we had America be created. And it was a declaration of independence away because the king was trying to tax the property rights over here. And that made people turn around and form their own country. So there's always a sort of conflict between I deserve, my own human rights are associated with my private property rights. And I think that this thing will continue. And I'm a big believer that you should be buying, beautiful 24 karat gold jewelry. You should be gift giving silver coins to your children. Don't buy them video games. Don't buy them any of these gaming. You go give them silver coins and they keep them and they stock them. And every year they're stocking them. And that's what I like to see. My little 8-year-old has 8 silver coins stocked. And for my other relatives and for all my employees, every year I give them a silver coin at Christmas. And the longer they're here, the bigger the stack.
Stick around and you'll get more coins. Frank Holmes, before we wrap up, can you tell us how we can follow you on social media and more about US funds and Hive Digital?
Well, you go to usfunds.com. It's really nice and easy, usfunds.com, and subscribe to the investor alert. It's read in 80 countries by 100,000 readers every week, published my global travels and my views of the world. And we do a SWOT analysis of different asset classes, particular gold, which we're talking about today, and global resources, luxury goods. Interesting enough, I have the only luxury goods mutual fund, and it's only for Americans. But I thought I learned about luxury goods because of gold. Gold taught me to evolve to learn about Bitcoin. The knowledge of why would you own gold helped me all of a sudden discover the significance of luxury goods. And who's the richest guy in Europe? Luxury goods, LVMH. So there is a connection of when you limit supply and you have adoption and growth, then you could turn around and see this exponential growth. What's happening with Bitcoin is it's capped at 21 million coins, and the supply is going to have tomorrow. So the amount of daily supply was 900 coins a day. It's going to fall to 450. So that means the algorithm says eventually there'll be no more coins. But as more people adopt it, then it grows under Metcalfe's law. It grows exponentially in price. And so when you think of one Bitcoin is worth 100 million Satoshis. At one penny, that's worth $1 million Bitcoin. Some of our Satoshis were used for art and they were valued at $10. So not a penny. So what's happening here is that each Satoshi has its own 64 digit number. And that's I can get a picture of you with your daughter or your son and if they were born in the past decade, walking down the beach of that day, that hour, or when they were born, attached to that piece of Bitcoin. And Bitcoin network is over 18,000 decentralized people validating the nodes, the 18,000 nodes validating all transactions. So it's a unique ecosystem. And I really was trying to work on gold and gold art being attached to a Satoshi. Therefore, you would have this ability to have gold art and move that around the world attached to it. So it'll evolve. Technology will evolve. It's exciting. The AI world is also exciting, and the gold world it trades higher. In my calculations, gold should be 4,000 today, based on what I said 5 years ago, and I think if we look at how fast the monetary base is increasing, it should be at $10,000. So I think that's showing up. Central banks are buying because of those reasons. Demographics are in our favor. So I think we're in a beautiful gold bull market.
Yeah. I think you painted a great picture there. One last question though with Bitcoin. I'm a fan of alternative currencies. I mean, like everyone else, I see what's going on in the world. What would it take for Bitcoin to be just a bit more stable? Coming from the viewpoint that if Bitcoin were to be money, and I mean this in a positive way, what does Bitcoin need to offer the quality of being stable? In other words, what does it need to be a bit more stable?
It's all about adoption. You can see that when Tesla went into the S&P 500, that every index had to adopt it. Its volatility dropped. You've seen the GLD when it first came out. The daily volatility of gold was plus or minus 3%. It's now exactly the same as the S&P 500, 1%. And so you've seen now with the ETFs that have come out this past quarter, that the daily volatility of Bitcoin is shaved 2%. So it's all about adoption.
Okay, adoptions. Great point there again. Uh, Frank, is there anything else that you want to get in?
No, and I just stay. We all have to really be thankful. We're talking, we're alive. I woke up this morning. I ran my three miles, my 5K. I can still run at 69. I thank God that I'm blessed that I can do that and carry on a conversation with you and try to read about where the world's going.
Yeah, it's a great point. So amen to that. But Frank Holmes, we appreciate your time. Stay in good health and keep that innovation going. And I really hope we can do this again soon and see what other hats you may be wearing next time.
Yes. Well, thank you, my friend. Take care.
That was Frank Holmes sharing his views on precious metals, Bitcoin, and the economy. To see more of Frank's views and work, please go to usfunds.com and also HIVE Digital Technologies.com. If you like this video, please do subscribe, give it a thumbs up, and share. All are greatly appreciated. Audio-only versions of this interview can be found on iTunes and Spotify.